And hello from Sydney, and welcome back to the Proof of Concept podcast. My name is Greg Case. We are the tech show where we explore real life use cases from the field and discuss hot questions in the field of data science and AI. As always, I am here in Sydney, but my cohort in crime up there in Singapore, welcome Alex Hubert. How are you?
Hey Grant, hey guys. I'm really well. Very happy to be back here.
And happy holidays. It's almost time. We can go on vacation.
Technically speaking, actually, it's. I mean, especially for you, it's Happy Thanksgiving for some of our listener in APAC that may be American, like Grant or the friends that we have in the region. And a happy Christmas to the rest potentially. Yeah, that's the last episode of the season. So,
well, wherever you are, hopefully you are having a wonderful holiday season and you are getting ready for the new year. And this is our final episode of season 1 of the Proof of Concept podcast. We've been renewed. Yay! So we get to come back for season 2.
Thank you so much for our support, guys. That's very helpful.
Yeah, we really, really do appreciate it. And we're very, very excited. We've got some great ideas coming for you in 2022 in season 2 of the Proof of Concept podcast.
Let's. I know that a lot of people are following it on LinkedIn. We often ask for your comments and suggestions, but do not hesitate to reach out to Grant and myself if eventually one day you would love to bring up a subject for the proof of concept. We would be very, very happy to have you potentially live with us to discuss something that is related to tech, AI. So yeah, reach out to us directly, and then let's take it from there.
Yeah, we're absolutely looking for new ideas and new folks to come onto the podcast and talk in 2022. So with that, so today's topic, Alex, is one that's a very, very curious, very interesting, right now, very, very, very hot if you get out there in the LinkedIn. And I'm calling this the curious case of Zillow. So for those who are not aware of this particular what's been happening, Alex, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of introduction to the curious case of Zillow?
So first of all, because there's a lot of noise right now in Medium and LinkedIn and pretty much everywhere. So I want to start by saying that here on the POC, we can only speculate. Obviously, we did some research, but ultimately we spoke to no one at Zillow. We could only check the facts that we could check through, personal research, looking into the case study index, for instance, this kind of stuff. But we don't know much more than anyone else and what's available on the internet. That being said, and really it might be controversial, but first of all, I will start by saying that it is so refreshing to see this kind of AI failure and not another scandal about ethics and bias towards one minorities or chatbot being racist in 24 hours, being live. It's actually very refreshing to see a normal business case of failure of AI, and we need more of those. So first and foremost, kudos actually to the Zillow team for owning the mistake and calling it out openly during the results and saying that we made a massive business from a massive mistake. Sorry, from an AI perspective, this is hurting our business, and we need to shut it down. Like, a lot of organizations that would have just try to put it under the carpet as if nothing happened and find any possible explanation to protect the almost mystical aura of the AI and machine learning.
The mystical aura.
Exactly. So what happened exactly? Well, from what we saw, just sticking to the facts, Zillow's basically announced that they're closing a huge part of their business that was in charge of buying and selling houses at a profit. They closed that after making a loss of something around $300 million, something like this. I was reading figures like that. They still have about 2 billion of houses in their inventories that have to be sold. That's significant. Where is the AI part in there? Well, the particularity of Zillow is they were using a machine learning algorithm to identify houses that were potentially mispriced so that they could do renovation on top of it and then sell it at a profit in the market. It's a very well-known business. Some organization has been doing that for years. I'm thinking about Open Doors, who's listed, for instance. And it can be a very profitable business. However, in the case of Zillow, it didn't really work as expected.
So let's talk a little bit about, what's cool about this particular piece. And I think one of the interesting things about this is you just mentioned it, and it's the Zestimate. For those who don't know what the Zestimate is, this is basically, it started out as a Kaggle competition over a decade ago, whereby Zillow, in effect, how they can go about understanding and pricing every house, in fact, in the entire United States. So
Yeah.
every house has a price associated with it. They take a bunch of the different variables into the estimate itself, and then effectively build a model to price every home. In fact, you can actually, for my family back in the U.S., I could see their houses and how the value of their asset goes up or down in the case of sometimes. But what else is cool about it, Alex?
So what the cool thing about it, before we dive more into the failure, is as you said, first of all, they were using AI to do this. They were using AI openly. But if you go back in time, 4 years ago, they released quite an important Kaggle competition with 1.2 million US dollar associated in prize money. The data set that they released became an absolute classic in the data science and machine learning community. Everyone has been using closely, or has been related at some point to that data set. It's very well documented. You have very nice features. And I mean, you had a lot of engagement on that competition, obviously, with a $1.2 million price. You would expect that the best data scientists in the world would be working on this, and that's been, especially beginning of Kaggle, it was not uncommon to see big organization like this to come up with a data set and trying to ask the community to come with a machine learning model to solve one of their business problems. That's
Netflix
really
acts
cool.
a bunch of them, right? Yeah.
Airbnb, I remember I did a couple of Airbnb ones. So yeah, pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Can't deny that fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that kind of dovetails nicely into all of this. And when I think about just in general what's cool about this, while the problem may seem and the modeling is incredibly complex, there's a lot of good understanding. So when I was teaching to my students, I always taught about the first model you create is the one based upon what your feedback and your sense of how the model should work. And when it comes to homes, it's a very easy one, at least for anybody that's new, to actually think about, right? So for me,
I
it's
think
like,
one of my first pet project in DSS was related to house pricing.
mhm,
It's exactly what you say. It's what you know. You should be starting with what you know.
exactly, exactly. And I mean, it's really not, I mean, you look at TensorFlow, one of the samples for TensorFlow is the one that you're doing. So again, it's all there.
Yeah. If we take the next item that we usually talk about, it's Eli 5, right? How can we try to explain to an executive at your organization, my organization, and try to explain to them what went wrong and why they should care about what was happening. And if I'm trying to get into the details here, I'm not going to be talking too much about the machine learning model itself. I'm going to go back to the business case, because from what I see, and again, I don't want to speculate too much. Okay, people are saying they were using a very easy open source Prophet stuff, and obviously this was leading to a potential catastrophe. Potentially, I don't know. All I'm saying is the kind of metric that you saw was pretty good. You are talking about 2% accuracy potentially. But when you start to look into the details, this is where you find the catastrophe. It's a regression problem, right? You're supposed to predict the house prices. If you predict with a 2% accuracy, it means that something that costs 100, you're going to be potentially pricing it at 102 or 98. Now comes in the business question. If I am a seller of a house and you offer me 102 on something that costs 100, guess what I'm going to do? Of
Yeah, I'm
course,
going
I'm
to
going
take
to
that.
sell my
Yeah.
house.
The
But
flip side of
now,
that,
exactly, yeah, go ahead with the flip side.
the flip side is right. If I believe that the price is 102 and you're offering me 98, there's no sell. So that
Exactly.
even if, yeah. So to me, that becomes more the interesting part. There is buyer's remorse through as a potential. So if we just think about your particular problem of 198 and 102, if the product is 100, if the actual value is 100 and I offer 102 and you think it's 98, you take it every time. And I'm actually down two. I'm down two, right?
Yeah.
So, but the only time as a buyer that things go well for me and I actually make a profit, at least on the purchase, is when I actually buy it for less than what the market is and you believe it's less. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the curious second piece of this, which is we're alluding to Zillow was looking to flip houses. They were in the HGTV home. What they were looking for is to actually, in essence, reno and sell it, right, Alex?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like ultimately, you were supposed to buy an asset and then making sure that you buy it at a price very underneath the price of the market to renovate it and then sell it at a profit. And this is where you start to understand potentially the failure, or at least how we understand it here at the POC. Like, first of all, you were skewed to buy more expensive assets than the other way around. Then you need to factor in the cost for renovation. You can potentially add potential market trend. We don't know where exactly they were buying assets, but it's more likely than not, when you understand machine learning and the way that they work, that you were probably spotting opportunities in, I don't want to say illiquid market, but probably in some places where the big market trends were not exactly visible in those situations, like in suburbs. But I don't know. Like, this is where I'm completely speculating. I don't know. But those three factors combined, and those are very, very big business questions, not related to machine learning. Once again, 2% accuracy on a regression problem, it's fairly good. I mean, we can debate all day long we want as to which metrics did they use. They use an open source model, all that kind of stuff. Great. The real problem is when you put it into a bigger business questions, there are some very unanswered questions, or questions that were probably just put under the carpet once again, and that didn't help to keep the business afloat.
Yeah, and I think for me, this becomes as we think about it from an explaining it process. This is not Zillow wasn't the only game in town when we were talking about this. There are multiple. You alluded to one of the organizations, Open Door. There's also another organization, Redfin. They have their own models. They actually do this business. So it's not as if this is completely different than anything
Yeah.
else out there. And it's not like Zillow was out there on their own. There are companies out there that are doing well in this, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a complete different business once again. Like at the first place, Zillow is a website where you go, you browse a massive index to potentially find the place you're gonna buy or rent. It wasn't in the business of flipping houses, and they learned at their expense that yes, having a very nice machine learning model associated to a problem doesn't turn an idea into a very profitable business from one day to the next. Now, a lot of people are going to say, and again, I like to insist on that, they are really shedding the lights on poor MLOps strategy, potentially, once again, the use of Prophet. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about Prophet, Grant, and what Prophet
Yeah.
is.
So when actually the whole Zestimate came out, it was actually an ensemble model. So let's take many different models and combine them. It's roughly about 1,000.
Yeah.
At some point in time, Zillow started to move towards a neural network model. And in this case, that's profit. So, meaning Facebook, I guess this was about 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah,
released
something like that.
profit. Yeah,
Yeah.
with a time series neural network. Actually, one of the issues we have here at Dataiku was actually getting profit installed because of it, just the complexity of it. Alex is blushing there because he knows we've been down this road.
Kudos to Alex Combesi, because he was in my team back in London, and I remember him
We
scratching
all
his head
cursed it.
a couple of times.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of the interesting thing. It is an open source model. It is time series driven. And if we think about kind of the sales of homes, it's a very seasonal process. I am always a big fan of winter's models. So in effect, taking the rate, the trend, and the seasonality into account in terms of sales. So the big issue has been, okay, were you using profit and were you using it in a way that it shouldn't have been done in the first place? So when we think about kind of, while we're not talking about bias in AI, I'm talking about if we think about bias in general in terms of modeling, one of those biases is taking a model and putting it towards a process that may not have been necessarily the right one. And there's a question, open question: was this the right model, the right algorithm to apply to this particular problem?
Yeah, and again, like without like, it's pure speculation, but it's true that if you just simply, that's the danger and the identified danger coming out of open source. If you simply take a model coming from the open source world, you apply it to a problem that you haven't fully integrated into the real business question associated to it, then you're probably gonna fail. And again, without having all the details, when I'm hearing about people blaming on the MLOps side, I want to believe, I haven't talked to anyone at Zillow, but I want to believe that from an MLOps side, actually they probably did the right things. I'm pretty sure that over and over again, they were testing their models and they were getting consistently the same level of metrics. They were retraining it the right way. Potentially, I mean, if I was, and I suppose that they have invested a lot of money anyway. When you invest $1.2 million just on the Kaggle competition, I don't want to believe that they didn't have people that did the right champion challenger model, potentially having multiple models per cities that they were targeting. I don't want to believe that that's the case. It doesn't seem like in line with the kind of organization that would go to Kaggle and then just ask data scientists to come up with something smart. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Sometimes we can we can all be a bit naive. I don't know. But to me, I'm pretty sure on the MLOps side, they were actually pretty solid. The real failure here and the real learning for organizations that want to learn from that failure is if you don't have the right governance associated to MLOps, associated to any business question that you're trying to solve, then you're going to fail. The reason why I'm saying this is with the right governance, I want to believe that someone would have pointed out the fact that, hey, when you flip houses, they are the key critical component that we are talking about at the first place when we were beginning the conversation.
No, and I think this actually dovetails very nicely into something, the compare and contrast. And I'd like to kind of let's box this a little bit on compare and contrast to be more around, what we believe the inputs and the potential issues may have been. We kind of alluded to those to the top. So we've been talking about the model itself. So we talk about profit as a potential issue what other potential kind of the comparisons into this that we think could have been here. So I think for me, when I look at, especially in new organizations, you almost get this aura of the model itself. And we're talking about, um, you have a whole set of business people that say, let's push it to the limit. Let's
Yeah.
let's take it everywhere we go. And when I'm thinking about the difference between I'm taking a model and trying to understand it versus I'm using it in a way I'm not necessarily should be, or I'm discounting it in a way that was never, I never should have, that to me becomes a problem. So I think part of this has been, what were you using the model for, and how are you informing your own decisions around it? Because at least as I've read, if you pick up a little bit of the chatter around this, was the business was actually, you know, not even necessarily taking it always into account, right?
Yeah. 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 And that's a big problem. And I mean, if we want to stick to that section that we usually do, compare and contrast, let's just remove AI for 1 second. If you're just someone that does that on the side, like some people do sometimes in the US, you have a lot of shows. You don't necessarily need an AI model to do this, but what are you going to do? You're going to really take into consideration the business, your income, the budget you want to associate to all that kind of stuff. And in that specific case, today, the case of Zillow really identify and highlight the disconnect between the data science team can be pretty smart. Once again, I'm pretty sure they were quite good at what they were doing on the data science side. Maybe profit was not the right choice. I don't want to speculate here, but the disconnect between them and someone who's managing an inventory, managing buying the house, managing the process of buying the house, managing the process of renovating the houses. When you have such a massive disconnect between the two, well, compared to what someone on the side may be doing, you are going to fail because the two are not integrated well enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that actually brings up an interesting point. And actually, love to hear from you guys. Please, down in the comments. This is an fascinating discussion in and around this. We're trying to get into. This is a very special POC podcast because this is a. I think for us, this is always an interesting question because it is that cross section of the business and the model itself when it comes to this. And I
Yeah.
and what I'm and if you think about one particular aspect, if you're so I spent 4 years working for the Royal Bank of Canada in and around builders. So we were making home construction loans to builders. Surprise, surprise, between 2001 and 2005, right before the big financial recession, the global recession, right? I was like, right, I was at the beginning of it. But to me, this kind of the interesting thing about it is you have to make some decisions. You have to know, and you alluded to this earlier. It's like you got to know what's going to happen in 6 months from now. You have to be both from the market perspective. You have to know the home. There were questions in and around. They were basically buying sight unseen. That's kind of what an iBuying organization is doing. So, you go, you buy, and you've got, okay, you think you did a good deal, and suddenly the roof hasn't been updated and it's got leaks. Guess what? You're in for 30 grand US immediately, and that may have wiped out all of your profitability on it.
Yeah.
So for me, that's that the Zestimate was never built for that. You can't build in the budget for the purchase and the reno of a home, right?
Yeah, no, clearly. And once again, hence my kudo not only for the Zillow team to own the fact that they made a mistake on the machine learning side to make it public, but also to cut their losses fairly quickly, because ultimately less than a year after starting the business, despite all the very nice headlines, they haven't gone deeper into that topic or really bury themselves much more than what they are right now. They realize they made a mistake and now they're just getting out of the business.
And as a former banker, I got to believe their lending organizations weren't as happy about it either. It's like, you're
Most
bringing me
probably.
what in collateral?
Yeah.
So so why don't we talk a little bit about how, in the case of if we were to put ourselves back in the shoes, how do we make money, save money, improve the customer experience in and around this, right? So I think, you in our pre-show discussion, you've really been big, and you've even hit it a little bit about, basically cutting your losses quickly. So why don't you expound upon that just a hair?
Yeah, like here again, like if if Zillow really wanted to, I guess, turn that into a profitable business, I think unfortunately starting by looking at it as an AI problem and then getting into the business was probably not the wrong way. So if really you want to learn something out of it, it's once again business first. I mean, we said that a couple of times in that
Yeah.
podcast. It's always business first. You take a business problem, and some people will argue, yeah, but that's what they did. The devil always lies in the details. Truly understand what's the business question. Zillow is really good at making somewhat, their algorithm is really good at making somewhat of a good prediction of the price. Is it really good at identifying uh, strong market opportunities that can be flipped into a profit? No, because as we just said before, if you realize that you can't spot potentially that the leak, that the roof was leaking, and therefore you can be really good at predicting the price, but it's probably not a good flipping opportunity. So the real way to make money out of that error is to put the business back in the center, to understand the governance around AI, the governance around business, and try to integrate the two as much as possible. Have that very strong feedback loop between AI and business, always lead by the business anyway. Have the tighter integration between business and AI as possible. And that goes through a very strong governance internally to make sure that it's not going to be the data scientist ultimately taking business decisions.
Mhm. And if I was to think, kind of from my perspective on the make money, save money, I think about it from, you know, again, this is all speculation based upon, just the stories. And I'm sure the story, it will become clear over time. I think if the model is telling you something, and the ramp up in the purchases by Zillow over the last year, because in effect, they were trying to build an entirely new business. So they were trying to scale that business out. If you look at house flippers, that's you're basically tying up a huge amount of capital. You're typically only paying it's an interest only loan for some period of time, and then you're coming back and paying P&I after that. So it's a very get in, get out, and move on. And it's typically why it's only, small. You'll see if you watch any of these shows, if you look at anything that might be happening in communities in and around home flipping, they're not buying 30 or 40 homes at a time. They're buying like 5 or 6, and then they're renovating it, because you're tying up that capital. I think in the case of Zillow, just in one market, they've got 2,500 homes. That's
I mean, like right now,
insane.
the value of the inventory is somewhere around north of $2 billion. It's huge.
Yeah, that's an insane amount of inventory. And to be fair, if you think about it, just from a you know law of big numbers, what are the chances that one of those homes is just completely shot?
Yeah.
And this is not a high margin business, right?
No.
So, and this actually comes back to the accuracy point. If it's a low margin business, even if you're pretty accurate, you could still end up upside down and effectively where Zillow has been on this. So I
Exactly.
think for me, it's becoming, understanding kind of what are the limits of what the business is, and maybe the model was telling them, hey, this is, if like you said, if it's 2%, it's $2,000. If you're buying a $500,000 home, that's 10 grand, right? If you're two standard deviations away from the mean, okay, now you might be looking, you're upside down 35, 40,000. It takes a whole lot of new purchases in order to make that up. Having been in the credit card business, we always said it takes about what do we say? Is take about $1,000 to make a dollar or pull out a dollar after a loss, right? So again, it's tough stuff. So
Indeed.
I would say so for our predictions, I'm curious to hear what you've got here, Alex, because I think really we could talk about the Zillow, we could talk about the other iBuying programs, we could even just talk about in general, what does this mean, for us going
And again,
forward?
like it's the conversation is extremely interesting, and it's almost, again, it's, you can't say that because unfortunately a lot of people are getting affected from that, but
Yeah,
from a
lots of
pure
people
AI
lost
and
their
data
jobs,
science. Yeah,
and not, and
it's not
they
fun.
had nothing to do with AI.
Yeah, it's not fun at all, but at the same time it's such a very interesting story that a lot of people can hear from, that yeah, like I'm really happy to have that conversation right now. My prediction is we are going to see much more headlines like this one, because ultimately translating AI into actual business profitability is not easy. I was reading an amazing article from someone on Medium. I can't remember the author, about
We'll get it.
Netflix.
We'll get it out there.
It's on my feed anyway, so I can
Uh,
find it very quickly. You have 20 years of learning from Netflix, using AI and machine learning, and they explained pretty well that it took them 4 to 5 to 6 years to start to really nail down the game of recommendation and really see user engagement going up. So it's a tough business to just take a business problem, turning it into a data problem, and then rely on AI to really make very strong sounded, better business decision. It's not that simple. And if anything, not only I think we're going to have more headlines like this, we are also unfortunately going to see organizations that will try to not blame the AI, and again probably find all the reasons around it to not own the responsibility of that disconnect between business, data science, analytics, and not looking at things for what it is. Like ultimately, this is a governance problem. My prediction is we're going to see much more headlines like this one, but at the same time, a lot of organizations are going to learn from this failure to solve their governance issues and make sure that that integration between AI, that feedback loop between AI delivery and business is going to be, yeah, the loop is going to be closed, and ultimately move into the right direction. So ultimately, this is where we're going, right? What's your prediction?
So I'm very much with you. I think it's the law of big numbers. Given a sufficiently large population, everything's possible. And I think we're going to see more of this stuff. Just as AI and ML become more pervasive uh,
Yep.
for organizations, this is absolutely going to be something that hits more and more. I think there's also a good question in and around the blame game. Yeah, there's been comments from folks like Zillow that's like, oh, this is, it was the accuracy of the AI ML model. Uh, it becomes kind of an easy way to duck responsibility sometimes.
Yep.
That okay, it's the black box that nobody understands, haha, but
Yep.
it was really the governance in or around it that was the issue. I think that's going to happen. I also think this is very much we're going to see based on discussions like this and outcomes such as Zillow. And again, as someone who's been laid off, I completely, my heart goes out to everybody. That was my first job out of school working for Enron. 6 months later, I was looking for a new job. So I think we've all been, or someone, or you've gone through it yourself, so it's never fun. So how do we ensure things like that don't happen, or at least we limit the potential of them? Is rapid governance in and around this? Are we doing the right things? Are we checking the right boxes? Because quite frankly, I think some of this stuff could have been just basically done very much, it could have been stopped, right? So you didn't buy 2,000 houses straight off the bat, right? There had to be a set of decisions in and around that. Did the gates get, were we satisfying those gates? Were we getting the sorts of results we understood? I have a hard time believing all of this basically flipped inside of 3 months. I almost, it's like it was likely more of a systemic problem, and systemic problems are governance problems for the most part. So I think it's going to put another view and another hard look on governance, especially if you're a chief risk officer in a financial services organization, or you're a CFO of a public company. This is incredibly important, because your whole, this has the potential to flip you in a very, very quick way. And that makes for some very, very uncomfortable conversations with your investors a lot of times.
Clearly.
Really. So I want to thank you all. This has been a blast for our first season.
Thank you,
Alex,
guys.
I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. I hope you as
Yeah.
listeners, please, keep us in the comments. And while we're coming back for season 2, please reach out if you have suggestions. If you'd like to even maybe join us here on the podcast, we'd love to hear what you've got. But with that, Alex, happy holidays, man. Hopefully 2022 ends up being a better, definitely better than 2020 and definitely better than 2021, right?
It's improving. It's improving.
It's improving.
I took the plane last week. I should be taking it next week as well. So it's
yeah. So absolutely. So with that, thank you all so much. From here at the POC podcast, thanks so much. Take care. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you back here in 2022.
Thank you, guys. Speak to you soon. Bye.